To our amazing viewers at Cheating Tales Lab, we'd love to hear, which part of the world are you joining us from? Let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation of Trust. Vince Torino had built his life like a fortress, methodical, calculated, and impenetrable. At 42, he owned 3 successful auto repair shops across Phoenix, each one a testament to his transition from the streets to legitimate business. His hands, once stained with the blood of enemies in underground fighting rings, now bore only the honest grease of engines and the calluses of hard work. The transition hadn't been easy. Growing up in South Phoenix's roughest neighborhood, Vince had learned early that weakness invited predators. His father, a small-time enforcer for local loan sharks, had beaten that lesson into him literally. When Vincent was 16, he'd put his father in the hospital permanently. The old man never walked the same again, and Vincent never looked back. Underground fighting had been his escape and his income through his 20s. The Phoenix, they'd called him, for how he'd rise from seemingly impossible situations to destroy his opponents. But at 30, after watching too many fighters leave the ring in body bags, Vincent had decided to channel his violent skills into building something lasting. His wife, Linda Torino, had been the catalyst for that change. A beautiful blonde with emerald eyes and a nursing degree, she'd patched him up after a particularly brutal fight 7 years ago. Their courtship had been a whirlwind. She was everything soft where he was hard, everything gentle where he was fierce. She'd convinced him he could be more than just a weapon. Their son Tommy, now 15, had cemented Vincent's desire for legitimacy. The boy was Vincent's pride, smart, athletic, and showing none of his father's violent tendencies. Vincent had worked tirelessly to ensure Tommy would never need to use his fists to survive, funding the boy's education at Phoenix's most prestigious private school. But Vincent's mother, Maria Torino, had never trusted Linda. The 70-year-old Italian matriarch had raised Vincent alone after his father's accident, and her instincts about people were razor-sharp. "That girl smiles too much, Mijo," she'd warned repeatedly. "Women who smile like that are hiding something." Vincent had dismissed his mother's concerns as old-world superstition. Linda was perfect, the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect partner for a man trying to leave his dark past behind. She attended every charity function, organized neighborhood barbecues, and maintained their suburban home like something from a magazine. The Torino family lived in Paradise Valley, Arizona's wealthiest enclave. Their sprawling ranch-style home sat on 2 acres, complete with a pool, tennis court, and Vincent's pride, a fully equipped basement workshop where he restored classic cars. Linda had insisted on the basement when they'd built the house, claiming she wanted Vincent to have his own space away from the business. Vincent's closest friend and business partner, Rick Delacroix, often joked that Vincent had gotten too soft in suburbia. Rick, a former Marine who'd served 3 tours in Afghanistan, ran the security consulting side of Vincent's business empire. Where Vincent had found peace and domesticity, Rick remained sharp-edged and suspicious. "You're living in a dream, brother," Rick would say during their weekly poker games. "Nobody gets this lucky without paying for it eventually." But Vincent felt he'd already paid his dues. The scars on his knuckles, the permanent damage to his left shoulder from a fight gone wrong, the nightmares that occasionally still woke him. These were the price he'd paid for his current happiness. He'd earned his peace. The first crack in Vincent's perfect world had appeared 6 months ago, though he'd been too content to notice. Linda had started working late shifts at the hospital more frequently. She'd become more conscious of her appearance, buying new clothes and spending more time at the gym. When Vincent had complimented her on looking particularly beautiful, she'd brushed off his attention with casual dismissal. "You're just not used to me taking care of myself," she'd said, but something in her tone had felt hollow. Tommy had begun acting strangely too. The boy who'd once hung on his father's every word had become withdrawn, spending more time locked in his room. When Vincent tried to engage him about school or sports, Tommy's responses were monosyllabic and evasive. Even Maria had noticed the changes during her weekly Sunday dinners. "Something's not right in this house," she'd whispered to Vincent while Linda was in the kitchen. "The air feels different." But Vincent had been too busy expanding his business to pay proper attention. He'd just acquired a 4th location and was negotiating partnerships with several high-end car dealerships. Success had made him complacent, had dulled the survival instincts that had kept him alive through his violent youth. Chapter 2. Cracks in Paradise. The second warning sign had come from an unexpected source. Vincent's younger brother, Danny, had been released from prison 3 weeks ago after serving 5 years for armed robbery. Danny was everything Vincent had left behind: impulsive, violent, and utterly without conscience. But blood was blood, and Vincent had given Danny a job at his newest shop, hoping legitimate work might straighten out his brother's path. Danny had always been good at reading people, especially women. It was a skill that had gotten him into trouble with married women before, but it also made him unnaturally perceptive about relationships. "Your wife's cheating on you," Danny had said bluntly one evening as they closed the Central Avenue shop together. Vincent had laughed it off. "You've been in prison too long, Danny. You're seeing things that aren't there." "Nah, man. I know that look. I know how a woman acts when she's getting it somewhere else." Danny's scarred face had been serious. "She doesn't look at you the same way anymore. And she's too happy about everything. Nobody's that happy at home when they're getting their needs met there." The conversation had planted a seed of doubt that Vincent tried desperately to ignore. He'd started paying closer attention to Linda's behavior, looking for signs that would either confirm or dispel his brother's suspicions. Linda's phone habits had changed. She'd always been casual about leaving it around, but now she guarded it jealously, taking it with her to the bathroom and keeping it face down during meals. When it buzzed with messages, she'd check it with a secretive smile that made Vincent's chest tighten. Her work schedule had become increasingly erratic. The hospital, she claimed, was understaffed and needed her for double shifts and emergency coverage. But when Vincent had called the hospital one evening to speak with her, the charge nurse had seemed confused. "Linda? She left hours ago. Her shift ended at 3. When Vincent had confronted her about it, Linda had been ready with an explanation about stopping by her sister's house to help with the kids. But Vincent knew Linda's sister lived in Tucson, a 2-hour drive each way. The math didn't add up. The breaking point had come when Vincent discovered Linda's gym membership. She'd been claiming to work out at a small fitness center near the hospital, but Vincent had never seen charges for membership fees on their credit card statements. When he'd driven by the gym she'd mentioned, he'd found a vacant lot with a "for lease" sign that had clearly been there for months. Vincent's old instincts had begun to resurface. The same hypervigilance that had kept him alive in the fighting rings started applying itself to his marriage. He'd begun cataloging inconsistencies, noting patterns, building a case like a detective investigating a crime. Rick had noticed the change immediately. "You're going dark again, brother. I can see it in your eyes." "Just some business concerns," Vincent had lied, but Rick wasn't fooled. "Bullshit. This is personal. What's going on?" Vincent had eventually confided his suspicions to Rick, who'd offered to conduct surveillance on Linda. But Vincent had declined. He needed to handle this himself, needed to be absolutely certain before he acted. His violent past had taught him that assumptions could be deadly. Instead, Vincent had begun his own investigation. He'd installed tracking software on the family computer and hidden cameras in strategic locations around the house. He'd started coming home at unexpected times, making excuses to leave work early or arrive late. The evidence had accumulated slowly. Linda's internet history showed regular visits to discreet dating sites and hotels in Scottsdale. The cameras had captured her making hushed phone calls in the laundry room, speaking in tones Vincent had never heard her use. But it was Tommy's behavior that had truly alarmed Vincent. The boy had become increasingly hostile toward his father, defending his mother with a fierce protectiveness that seemed out of proportion to normal family dynamics. "You don't understand Mom like I do," Tommy had snapped during an argument about his grades. "She's going through stuff you can't even imagine." The comment had struck Vincent as oddly mature for a 15-year-old. It suggested that Tommy knew more about his mother's situation than he should. The possibility that his son was complicit in Linda's deception had been like a physical blow to Vincent's chest. Vincent's relationship with his mother had always been his anchor, the one constant in his turbulent life. Maria Torino was a small woman made of pure steel who'd survived her husband's violence, raised 2 sons alone, and built a small catering business that served Phoenix's Italian community. "Mijo," she'd said during their last conversation, "you look like you're dying inside. What's that woman done to you?" Vincent had been unable to answer. The thought that Linda might be betraying him was destroying the very foundation of who he thought he'd become. Everything he'd built, Everything he'd worked for, all of it was predicated on the belief that he'd found something real and lasting. But Vincent Torino had never been a man to accept betrayal quietly. The same cold fury that had made him legendary in the underground fighting scene was beginning to build again, waiting for confirmation of what he already knew in his heart. Chapter 3: The Watchers and the Watched. Vincent's investigation had taken a darker turn when he'd enlisted help from an old contact. Carlos "Ghost" Martinez had been Vincent's trainer during his fighting days, a former Special Forces operative who'd transitioned into private security work. Ghost specialized in surveillance that left no trace, the kind of work that required skills most private investigators didn't possess. "You sure you want to go down this road, Phoenix?" Ghost had asked during their clandestine meeting at a dive bar in South Phoenix. "Some truths are harder to live with than lies." "I need to know," Vincent had replied. All of it. Ghost's surveillance had been comprehensive and damning. Linda wasn't just having an affair, she was living a double life. The man she was seeing was Dr. Bradley Morrison, a plastic surgeon who specialized in reconstructive work for wealthy clients. Morrison was married himself, with 2 young children and a society wife who organized charity galas. But the surveillance had revealed something far more disturbing than simple adultery. Linda and Morrison had been conducting their affair in the basement of Vincent's own home, using the workshop space he'd built with his own hands. The hidden cameras Ghost had installed there captured everything: their intimate encounters, their plans, their cruel laughter about Vincent's ignorance. Worse still, Tommy had been aware of the affair from the beginning. The boy had been acting as a lookout, warning his mother when Vincent was coming home early. In one particularly devastating recording, Vincent had watched his son and wife mock him, with Linda calling him a has-been tough guy playing at being respectable. "He has no idea what's really going on," she'd laughed while wrapped in Morrison's arms. "Still thinks I'm his perfect little wife." The recordings had revealed that Morrison was pushing Linda to divorce Vincent and take half of everything in the settlement. The doctor had expensive tastes and mounting debts from his own lifestyle, and he saw Linda's marriage as a financial opportunity. "Once you're free of that Neanderthal, we can be together properly," Morrison had said. "My wife will be easy to handle. She'll take the kids and disappear to her parents' estate in Connecticut. Your husband's businesses are worth millions." But Linda had been hesitant about divorce, preferring to maintain the status quo while enjoying her secret relationship. "Vincent's useful," she'd admitted. "He pays for everything, and he's too stupid to figure out what's happening. Why would I give that up?" Vincent had watched hours of these recordings in Ghost's secure facility, each revelation cutting deeper than the last. The woman he'd loved and trusted had been systematically betraying him for over a year, using his own home as a backdrop for her deception. The most devastating discovery had been Tommy's full participation in the betrayal. The boy hadn't just been a passive observer. He'd been actively helping his mother conceal her affair. In one recording, Vincent had watched his son delete messages from Vincent's voicemail, preventing him from discovering Linda's lies about her whereabouts. "Why are you helping her do this to Dad?" Morrison had asked Tommy during one of their basement encounters. "Because he's not my real father," Tommy had replied with shocking coldness. "Mom told me the truth last year. My real father is someone who can give me a better life than this." The revelation had been like a physical blow. Vincent had raised Tommy from infancy, had loved the boy as his own blood, had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities Vincent had never had. To learn that Linda had been telling the boy lies about his parentage, or possibly revealing truths she'd hidden for 15 years, was devastating beyond comprehension. Ghost had continued surveillance for 2 more weeks, building a comprehensive file of evidence. The investigation had revealed that Linda and Morrison were planning to escalate their relationship soon. Morrison's wife was traveling to Europe for a month with their children, giving the couple an opportunity to spend extended time together. "They're planning something big," Ghost had reported during their final meeting. "Morrison's been researching private investigators and divorce attorneys. They're going to move against you soon." Vincent had absorbed this information with outward calm, but inside, the old Phoenix was awakening. The man who'd survived the streets, who'd never lost a fight, who'd built an empire from nothing, that man was preparing for war. The final piece of evidence had come from an unexpected source. Maria Torino had called Vincent 3 days ago with disturbing news. "Mijo, that doctor came to see me," she'd said. her voice tight with anger. He offered me money to sign papers saying you abused Linda. When I refused, he threatened to have me investigated by immigration. The threat against his mother had been the final straw. Vincent's transformation was complete. The suburban businessman was gone, replaced by the cold predator who'd once ruled Phoenix's underground fighting scene. Vincent had spent the last 72 hours planning his response with the same methodical precision he'd once applied to destroying opponents in the ring. Every detail had been considered, every possible outcome evaluated. He'd arranged for his mother to take an extended vacation to visit relatives in Italy, ostensibly a gift for her upcoming birthday, but actually to remove her from potential danger. He'd transferred liquid assets to secure accounts and prepared legal documents that would protect his businesses regardless of what happened next. Most importantly, he'd prepared a message that would draw all the players to exactly where he wanted them. The text message Vincent was about to send had been crafted with surgical precision, designed to trigger panic and force immediate action from everyone involved in the conspiracy against him. Vincent sat in his car outside his youngest shop, the evening sun casting long shadows across the empty parking lot. In a few minutes, he would send the message that would bring his enemies running to the trap he'd prepared in his own basement, the same basement where they'd betrayed him for over a year. The old Vincent would have simply killed them all and buried the bodies in the desert. But the new Vincent, the one who'd learned patience and strategy, had something far more elaborate in mind. Chapter 4. The text that changed everything. Vincent's fingers hovered over his phone's keyboard for a long moment before typing the message that would shatter his carefully constructed life forever. The text was designed to create maximum panic while forcing his targets to act quickly and carelessly. Your basement. Now, what they did to your son. He sent it simultaneously to Linda, Morrison, and 3 other numbers, 2 belonging to Morrison's business associates who had become unwitting accomplices, and 1 to a number he discovered in Linda's secret phone records. The message was vague enough to create confusion, but specific enough to drive them all to the same location. Vincent's plan was elegant in its simplicity. He'd spent the past week modifying his basement workshop, installing additional surveillance equipment, and making subtle changes that would serve his purposes. The space where his wife and her lover had betrayed him would become the stage for their reckoning. The drive home took exactly 12 minutes, during which Vincent's phone exploded with panicked calls and messages. He ignored them all, maintaining the cold focus that had made him legendary in his fighting days. Every emotion, rage, betrayal, heartbreak, was compressed into a diamond-hard core of purpose. Vincent pulled into his circular driveway and saw Linda's car already there, along with Morrison's silver BMW. Perfect. They'd taken the bait and were probably in the basement right now, trying to figure out what had gone wrong with their perfect plan. As he approached his front door, Vincent's mother emerged from her car. She wasn't supposed to be here. He'd sent her to stay with her sister across town. But Maria Torino had always been impossible to control when she sensed danger to her family. "Mijo, what's happening?" she demanded, her weathered face creased with worry. "Linda called me screaming about Tommy. She said something terrible happened." Vincent felt the first crack in his emotional armor. His mother's presence complicated everything, but there was no time to get her to safety now. The game was already in motion. "Ma, you need to stay outside," he said firmly. "No matter what you hear, don't come in." But Maria Torino hadn't raised 2 sons in South Phoenix by backing down from danger. "If my grandson is hurt, I'm going in there." Before Vincent could stop her, Linda burst through the front door, her face streaked with tears and her blonde hair disheveled. She threw herself at Vincent with desperate relief. "Oh God, Vincent! Thank God you're here. Something horrible happened to Tommy." Her performance was Oscar-worthy, all trembling lips and terrified eyes. "He's in the basement with Dr. Morrison. The doctor's trying to help him." But Linda's deception was so complete, so perfectly executed, that for a moment Vincent almost doubted his own evidence. This was the woman he'd fallen in love with, vulnerable, caring, desperate to protect their son. But the recording's ghost had shown him played in his mind like a soundtrack of betrayal. "Honey, you can't." Linda grabbed his arm as he moved toward the house. It's inhuman." Vincent looked into his wife's emerald eyes and saw the truth beneath her tears. She was terrified, but not for Tommy. She was terrified because their secret was about to be exposed, because the comfortable life she'd been living at his expense was about to end. "Where is Tommy?" Vincent demanded, his voice carrying the edge that had once made grown men back down in the fighting rings. Linda's mask slipped for just an instant, revealing the calculating woman beneath. He's downstairs. Dr. Morrison is with him." "Vincent, please, you have to trust me on this." But Vincent was done trusting. He pushed past Linda with enough force to send her stumbling backward, ignoring her screams of protest. His mother followed close behind, her small fists clenched with determination. The basement stairs had never seemed longer. Each step down brought Vincent closer to a confrontation that would define the rest of his life. Behind him, he could hear Linda's frantic whispers into her phone, probably warning Morrison that Vincent was coming. Chapter 5. Descent into Truth. The basement workshop that Vincent had built with his own hands stretched out before him like a crime scene. His tool benches, his restored car projects, his carefully organized equipment, all of it now felt contaminated by the betrayal that had taken place here. Dr. Bradley Morrison stood near the far wall, looking remarkably composed for a man caught in the act of destroying someone's life. He was younger than Vincent had expected, maybe 35, with the kind of soft handsomeness that came from a life without real consequences. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed, his silver hair artfully styled. Tommy sat on a workbench, his head in his hands, looking smaller and younger than his 15 years. When he saw Vincent, his face crumpled with what looked like genuine distress. "Dad, I'm sorry," the boy whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything." Vincent felt his heart crack at the words. Despite everything he'd learned, despite the recordings and the evidence, seeing his son's pain was almost unbearable. The boy he'd raised, the child he'd loved as his own blood, was suffering, and Vincent was about to make it worse. Morrison stepped forward with the confidence of a man accustomed to controlling situations. "Vincent, I know this looks bad, but I can explain everything. Tommy came to me because he was in trouble. He needed medical attention that he was afraid to tell you about." The lie was smooth, practiced, delivered with the kind of authority that worked on people who weren't expecting deception. But Vincent had spent years reading his opponents, learning to see through feints and misdirection. "What kind of trouble?" Vincent asked, his voice deceptively calm. Morrison hesitated for just a fraction of a second, long enough for Vincent to know he was improvising. "He's been self-harming, Vincent. Linda and I have been trying to help him without making things worse." Behind Vincent, his mother made a sound of disgust. Maria Torino's instincts about people were rarely wrong, and she was looking at Morrison like she'd found something unpleasant on her shoe. "Show me," Vincent said simply. "What?" Morrison's composure flickered. "Show me where he's been harming himself. Show me the medical evidence." Tommy looked up at that, his eyes wide with panic. The boy was clearly trapped between the lies he'd been told to tell and some deeper truth he couldn't voice. "Dad, please," Tommy whispered. "You don't understand. Everything's complicated." Vincent knelt in front of his son, taking the boy's hands in his own scarred fingers. "Tommy, I need you to tell me the truth. Right now. Whatever it is, whatever you've done, I need to hear it from you." The boy's face crumpled, and for a moment he looked like the child Vincent remembered, the little boy who'd crawled into his lap after nightmares, who'd cheered at Little League games, who'd asked endless questions about the cars Vincent restored. "They told me you weren't my real father," Tommy said in a broken voice. "They said my real father was a better man, and that you'd been lying to me my whole life." Vincent felt the world tilt on its axis. Not because the revelation was surprising, he'd heard it on ghost recordings, but because of the cruelty of using a child's identity as a weapon. "And you believe them?" Vincent asked gently. Tommy's tears came harder now. "I didn't want to, but Mom said she had proof. She said you'd taken me from my real father when I was little, and that's why you were always so angry, always working so hard. She said you felt guilty." Vincent looked up at Morrison, who was watching this family drama unfold with the detached interest of a scientist observing an experiment. There was no guilt in his expression, no remorse for the damage he'd helped inflict on a child's psyche. "And what did Dr. Morrison tell you?" Vincent asked, never taking his eyes off the other man. "He said he could help me find my real father. He said he had connections, knew people who could do DNA tests without you knowing." Tommy's voice was barely audible now. "He said once I turned 18, I could leave and you couldn't stop me." Maria Torino stepped forward, her small frame radiating fury. "Mijo," she said to Tommy, her voice gentle despite her anger. "Your father changed your diapers when you were a baby. He walked the floor with you when you had colic. He taught you to ride a bicycle and helped you with your homework every night for 10 years. What makes a man a father? Blood or love?" Tommy looked at his grandmother with confusion and dawning horror. "But Mom said." "Your mother is a liar," Maria said bluntly. "And this man is worse than a liar. He's a predator who destroys families for sport." Morrison finally spoke, his voice sharp with irritation. "This is exactly the kind of dramatic nonsense I was trying to protect Tommy from. Vincent, you're obviously unstable. Your son came to me because he was afraid of your violent tendencies." Vincent stood slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. Every instinct he developed in the fighting rings was screaming that Morrison was preparing to escalate the situation. "Is that why you've been sleeping with my wife in this basement for the past year?" Vincent asked conversationally. The question hit like a physical blow. Morrison's face went white, Tommy gasped in shock, and from upstairs came the sound of Linda's sharp intake of breath. "I don't know what you're talking about," Morrison said, but his voice lacked conviction. Vincent pulled out his phone and played a 30-second audio clip from Ghost Surveillance. Morrison's voice filled the basement, describing in graphic detail what he planned to do to Linda on Vincent's own workbench. Tommy doubled over as if he'd been punched. "Oh God," he whispered. "Oh God, oh God. How long have you known?" Vincent asked his son gently. 6 months, Tommy admitted through his tears. "I walked in on them one day. Mom made me promise not to tell you. She said it would destroy our family." Vincent felt something cold and final settle in his chest. The last of his illusions, the final hope that somehow this could all be a misunderstanding, died in that moment. "No, son," he said quietly. "She destroyed our family. I'm just cleaning up the mess." Chapter 6. The Architect of Ruin. Morrison was reaching for something in his jacket pocket when Vincent moved. 20 years of fighting experience compressed into a single, fluid motion. Vincent's hand shot out and grabbed Morrison's wrist with crushing force. "I wouldn't," Vincent said mildly, applying just enough pressure to make Morrison gasp. "My mother and son are watching." In Morrison's pocket, Vincent found a small pistol, a .22 caliber piece that looked expensive and well-maintained. The kind of weapon a man carried when he wanted to feel powerful but didn't actually expect to use it. "Now that's interesting," Vincent mused, ejecting the magazine and checking the chamber. "Dr. Morrison, do you have a permit for this weapon?" Morrison's composure was cracking now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the basement's cool temperature. "You're making a mistake, Vincent. You have no idea who you're dealing with." Vincent almost smiled at that. "Actually, I know exactly who I'm dealing with. Bradley Morrison, age 36, plastic surgeon with privileges at 3 hospitals. Married to Catherine Morrison, née Westfield, daughter of real estate mogul Harold Westfield. 2 children, ages 6 and 8. Morrison's eyes widened as Vincent continued. "You graduated medical school with substantial debt, which you've been servicing by performing cosmetic procedures for certain individuals who prefer to keep their medical needs private. Cash only, no questions asked. Some of these clients have very interesting backgrounds." The color drained from Morrison's face. Vincent had done his homework, working with Ghost to build a complete picture of the man who was trying to destroy his family. "You see, Bradley, can I call you Bradley? I know about your side business. The off-the-books procedures for people who need to change their appearance quickly. The cash payments. The clients who pay extra for your discretion." Vincent turned to Tommy, who was staring at Morrison with growing horror. "Tommy, did Dr. Morrison ever tell you about his special clients? The ones who come to him after they've had problems with the law?" "That's enough," Morrison snapped. "You're in over your head, Vincent. There are people who won't tolerate this kind of interference." "Is that a threat?" Vincent asked, his voice deadly quiet. Morrison seemed to realize he'd made a tactical error. The old Vincent, the Phoenix, was surfacing now, and Morrison was beginning to understand that he wasn't dealing with a suburban businessman anymore. "I'm telling you that this situation is more complicated than you understand," Morrison said, trying to regain control. "Linda came to me for protection. She was afraid of you, afraid of your violent past." From upstairs, Vincent could hear Linda's voice on the phone, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. She was calling for backup, probably reaching out to whatever network she and Morrison had been using to plan their scheme. "Tommy, Vincent said, never taking his eyes off Morrison. I want you to go upstairs with your grandmother. Whatever happens down here, you don't need to see it. Dad, no, Tommy protested. Whatever you're planning, please don't. I can't lose you too. The simple honesty in his son's voice almost broke Vincent's resolve. But then he remembered the recordings, the cruel laughter, the systematic destruction of everything he'd built. You're not going to lose me, son. But I need you to understand something. The man who raised you, who loved you, who would die for you, that man is your real father. Biology doesn't matter. Love matters. Maria Torino stepped forward and took Tommy's arm. Come, Mijo. Let your father handle this. As they climbed the stairs, Vincent could hear his mother speaking quietly to Tommy in rapid Spanish, probably explaining things that would help the boy understand the magnitude of what had been done to their family. Alone with Morrison, Vincent felt the last restraints of civilized behavior falling away. This was the man who had systematically seduced his wife, corrupted his son, and planned to destroy everything Vincent had built. Now then, Bradley, Vincent said conversationally, let's discuss your future. Morrison was looking around the basement desperately, probably searching for another weapon or an escape route. But Vincent had designed this confrontation carefully. There was only one way out, and Vincent controlled it. I know what you're thinking, Vincent continued. You're thinking that this is just some working-class tough guy who got lucky in business. You're thinking you can talk your way out of this, or buy your way out, or threaten your way out. Vincent began walking slowly around Morrison, the way a predator circles wounded prey. But here's what you don't understand, Doctor. I didn't get lucky in business. I earned every dollar by being smarter, more ruthless, and more determined than everyone else. Morrison was beginning to panic now, his breath coming in short gasps. What do you want? I want you to understand exactly what you've done, Vincent replied. You've destroyed a 15-year-old boy's sense of identity. You've corrupted a marriage that I thought was sacred. You've turned my own home into a stage for your perversion. Vincent stopped directly in front of Morrison, close enough that the other man could smell the violence coming off him like heat from a furnace. And now you're going to pay for all of it. Chapter 7. The Weight of Truth. Upstairs, the sound of voices grew louder. Vincent could hear Linda talking rapidly to someone. Probably more conspirators arriving to help manage the crisis. But he wasn't worried about numbers. In the confined space of his basement, numbers wouldn't matter much. Vincent, please, Morrison said, his professional composure completely gone now. We can work this out. I can disappear, never contact Linda again. You can have your family back. Vincent studied Morrison's face with the clinical detachment he'd once applied to analyzing opponents in the ring. Fear was useful. It made people sloppy, made them reveal things they'd rather keep hidden. Tell me about the others, Vincent said. What others? Vincent backhanded Morrison across the face with just enough force to sting. Not enough to cause serious damage, but enough to clarify their relative positions. The other married women you've seduced. The other families you've destroyed. Tell me about them. Morrison touched his cheek, his eyes wide with shock. Nobody had ever hit him before. That much was obvious from his reaction. I don't know what you're talking about, he stammered. Vincent hit him again, harder this time. Morrison stumbled backward, blood trickling from his split lip. Ghost found 4 other women, Bradley. For other marriages you've systematically destroyed over the past 3 years. All of them following the same pattern. Seduce the wife, corrupt the children, plan to take half of everything in the divorce. Morrison's face crumpled as he realized the scope of Vincent's investigation. How did I find out? Vincent finished. I hired professionals, Bradley. Real professionals, not the amateurs you've been working with. The sound of car doors slamming came from outside, followed by urgent voices. Vincent glanced at his watch. His other guests were arriving right on schedule. The question now, Vincent continued, is whether you're going to cooperate with me, or whether I'm going to have to extract the information I need by less pleasant means. Morrison was looking around desperately now, probably calculating his chances of reaching the stairs before Vincent could stop him. It wasn't a good calculation. What do you want to know? Morrison asked finally. Everything. The names of your accomplices. The location of your off-the-books clinic. The details of your arrangement with Linda. The names of the other families you've destroyed. Vincent pulled out his phone and began recording. Start talking. Morrison glanced at the stairs, then back at Vincent's implacable face. Whatever he saw there convinced him that cooperation was his only option. It started by accident, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I was treating a woman whose husband had been abusing her. She was beautiful, grateful, and she had money. When the marriage ended, she made sure I was well compensated for my emotional support. Vincent felt sick listening to Morrison's clinical description of predatory behavior disguised as medical care. Linda was different, though, Morrison continued. She approached me, said she was tired of being married to a violent man, tired of pretending to be happy in suburbia. Linda approached you? Vincent interrupted. You're saying this was her idea? Morrison nodded eagerly, probably thinking that shifting blame to Linda would somehow improve his situation. She'd heard about me through mutual friends. She wanted out of her marriage, but didn't want to lose the lifestyle you provided. Vincent felt the last piece of his heart turn to ice. Linda hadn't been seduced or manipulated. She'd been an active predator, seeking out a partner for her scheme. She had it all planned out, Morrison continued. The affair would continue until Tommy turned 18. Then she'd file for divorce, claiming irreconcilable differences. With your violent history, she was confident she could get full custody and a substantial settlement. The basement door opened, and footsteps clattered down the stairs. Vincent turned to see Linda descending, followed by two men he didn't recognize. Both were large, professionally dressed, and moving with the kind of confidence that suggested they were accustomed to intimidating people. Vincent, step away from Dr. Morrison, Linda commanded, her voice cold and authoritative. This has gone far enough. Vincent looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. The soft, caring woman he'd fallen in love with was gone, replaced by something calculating and predatory. Linda, he said conversationally, I've been having the most interesting conversation with your friend here. He's been telling me all about your partnership. Linda's face went pale, but she recovered quickly. Whatever he told you, he's lying. He's been stalking me, threatening our family. That's why I had to call for help. The two men flanking Linda stepped forward, and Vincent recognized the type immediately. Corporate security, the kind of muscle that rich people hired when they wanted problems to disappear quietly. Mr. Torino, the larger man said in a voice that suggested he'd done this kind of work before, you need to come with us. There are some people who want to speak with you about your recent activities. Vincent almost laughed. They still thought they were dealing with a suburban businessman who could be intimidated by implied threats and corporate muscle. I'm afraid I can't do that, Vincent said politely. You see, this is my house, and these people have been committing crimes in my basement. I'm well within my rights to defend my property. The security men exchanged glances, probably surprised by Vincent's calm response. They'd been expecting fear, submission, maybe some blustering about lawyers. They hadn't been expecting the cold confidence of a man who'd survived much worse than anything they could offer. This doesn't have to get ugly, the second man said, his hand moving inside his jacket. No, it doesn't, Vincent agreed. In fact, I'd prefer it didn't. My son has already seen enough trauma for one day. From upstairs came the sound of more vehicles arriving. Vincent's carefully orchestrated confrontation was about to become significantly more complex. Chapter 8. The Phoenix Rises. The basement had become crowded with predators and their enablers. Vincent stood in the center of his own workshop, surrounded by people who had systematically destroyed his life, and felt the familiar calm that had always preceded his most dangerous fights. Let me tell you a story, Vincent said, his voice carrying easily through the basement. 20 years ago, there was a young man who thought violence was the answer to every problem. He was good at it, very good. But violence without purpose is just destruction, and destruction without wisdom is just chaos. Linda stepped forward, her face a mask of false concern. Vincent, you're scaring me. This isn't like you. No, Linda. This is exactly like me. This is who I was before you convinced me I could be something else. Vincent's voice was utterly calm, which somehow made it more frightening than any shout would have been. The larger security operative was reaching for his weapon when Vincent moved. But Vincent wasn't the suburban businessman these people thought they were dealing with. He was the Phoenix, and the Phoenix had never lost a fight. Vincent's first strike disabled the armed man's drawing hand with surgical precision. 20 years of legitimate life hadn't dulled his reflexes or his ability to read an opponent's intentions. The man's pistol clattered across the concrete floor as he doubled over, clutching his broken wrist. The second operative was faster, but Vincent had been expecting that. The man's swing was powerful but telegraphed, the kind of attack that worked on civilians but was useless against someone who'd survived hundreds of underground fights. Vincent ducked under the punch and responded with an uppercut that lifted the man off his feet. Morrison was scrambling for the dropped pistol when Vincent caught him. The doctor's soft hands had never held anything more dangerous than a scalpel, and the unfamiliar weight of the weapon made him clumsy. Vincent disarmed him with a simple wrist control technique, then applied pressure to a nerve cluster that dropped Morrison to his knees. "Stop!" Linda screamed. "Vincent, please. This isn't solving anything." Vincent looked at his former wife. He corrected himself mentally and felt nothing but cold disgust. "You're right. Violence isn't solving anything. But then again, I'm not trying to solve anything. I'm trying to end something." From upstairs came the sound of more footsteps, heavy boots moving with military precision. Vincent smiled grimly. Rick had arrived with backup, just as they'd planned. "Vincent," Rick's voice boomed down the stairs. "Phoenix PD is en route. You've got maybe 5 minutes." Perfect timing. Vincent had counted on Rick's military training to coordinate the final phase of his plan with clockwork precision. "Linda," Vincent said, turning back to his wife, "you have a choice to make. You can cooperate with the investigation that's about to begin, or you can try to maintain your lies and face the consequences." Linda's mask was finally cracking, revealing the desperate woman beneath. "What investigation?" "Vincent, what have you done?" Vincent pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. Dozens of video files, audio recordings, and photographs documenting her affair and the conspiracy to destroy his family. "Ghost Martinez is very good at his job," Vincent said. "Every conversation you've had with Morrison for the past month has been recorded. Every plan you've made, every lie you've told Tommy, every cruel laugh at my expense, all of it documented." Linda's face went white as she realized the scope of Vincent's counteroperation. "You can't use those. They're illegal recordings." "You're absolutely right," Vincent agreed. "That's why I'm not going to use them in court. I'm going to use them for something much more effective." Vincent's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He answered it on speaker. "Phoenix, this is Ghost. Package delivered. The gentlemen upstairs are very interested in Dr. Morrison's moonlighting activities." Morrison's face crumpled as he realized what was happening. "You can't do this to me. I have a family." "So did I," Vincent replied without sympathy. "So did the other families you destroyed." The sound of official voices came from upstairs, federal agents, not local police. Vincent had been very careful about which authorities he'd contacted with his evidence of Morrison's illegal activities. "The DEA is particularly interested in your unlicensed procedures for cartel money launderers," Vincent continued conversationally. "Apparently, helping criminals change their appearance to avoid prosecution is a federal offense." Who knew? Morrison was hyperventilating now, probably realizing that his comfortable life of seducing married women was about to end very abruptly. "Linda," Vincent said, turning back to his wife, "the federal agents upstairs have some questions about your knowledge of Morrison's illegal activities. How you answer those questions will determine whether you're charged as an accomplice or treated as another victim." Linda was staring at him with something approaching recognition. For the first time, she was seeing the man she'd actually married, not the domesticated version she'd been manipulating, but the dangerous predator who'd built an empire from nothing. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I'm the man you should never have betrayed," Vincent replied. "I'm the father you convinced my son to reject. I'm the husband whose love you threw away for a criminal with soft hands and expensive suits." Vincent looked around at the people who'd invaded his basement, his home, his life. All of them were either injured, terrified, or both. The old Vincent would have kept going until none of them could threaten anyone ever again. But Tommy was upstairs, probably listening to every word. The boy had already been traumatized enough. "Federal agents are going to come down those stairs in about 30 seconds, Vincent announced. "Morrison is going to prison for a very long time. Linda, your future depends on how cooperative you decide to be." Vincent walked to the stairs, then turned back for one final look at the scene of his betrayal and triumph. "The phoenix always rises from the ashes," he said quietly. "But sometimes you have to burn everything down first." Chapter 9. Ashes and New Beginnings. 6 months later, Vincent stood in the office of his newest auto shop, watching through the window as Tommy worked on a classic Mustang in the bay below. The boy had insisted on learning the business from the ground up, claiming he wanted to understand what his father had built. The legal proceedings had unfolded exactly as Vincent had planned. Morrison was serving a 15-year federal sentence for money laundering, tax evasion, and performing unlicensed medical procedures. His cooperation with federal investigators had implicated a network of corrupt doctors and their criminal clients, earning him protective custody and a cell in a medium-security facility. Linda had avoided prison by providing testimony against Morrison and his associates, but the divorce settlement had been swift and merciless. Vincent's prenuptial agreement, insisted upon by his mother years earlier, had protected his business assets. Linda received exactly what she'd brought to the marriage, nothing. The revelation about Tommy's parentage had turned out to be another lie. DNA testing confirmed what Vincent had known in his heart. Tommy was his biological son. Linda had fabricated the story about another father as part of her psychological manipulation, probably hoping to make Tommy more receptive to Morrison's influence. Tommy had struggled with guilt and confusion for months afterward, requiring therapy to process the betrayal by the two adults he'd trusted most. But gradually, the boy had begun to heal, and their relationship had grown stronger than ever. "Dad," Tommy's voice came from the shop floor below. "This carburetor is giving me trouble. Can you take a look?" Vincent smiled and headed downstairs. Working with his hands, teaching his son, building something real and lasting. This was what mattered. The violence, the revenge, the elaborate schemes, those had been necessary to protect his family, but they weren't who he wanted to be. Rick Delacroix looked up from the engine he was rebuilding, his scarred hands still steady despite his military injuries. "Kid's got good instincts," he said. "Give him a couple more years, and he'll be better than both of us." Vincent nodded, watching Tommy's methodical approach to problem-solving. The boy had inherited Vincent's analytical mind and Maria's patient temperament, a combination that would serve him well in life. "Any word from Linda?" Rick asked quietly. Vincent shook his head. Linda had moved to Portland after the divorce, supposedly to start over. She'd made no attempt to contact Tommy or maintain any relationship with her son. Her abandonment had hurt the boy initially, but he was beginning to understand that some people were simply incapable of genuine love. "She sends a birthday card every year," Vincent said. "Tommy throws them away without opening them." Maria Torino emerged from the office, carrying a tray of coffee and sandwiches for the workers. At 71, she was more energetic than most people half her age, and she'd become the unofficial grandmother to every employee at Vincent's shops. "Mijo," she said to Vincent, "that reporter called again. She wants to interview you about the Morrison case." Vincent grimaced. The Morrison investigation had uncovered a network of corruption that reached into several major hospitals and medical practices. The media had dubbed it the surgeon's scheme, and several journalists had tried to get Vincent to tell his story. "Not interested," Vincent replied. "Let the lawyers handle the media." "Smart man," Rick agreed. "Nothing good comes from talking to reporters." Vincent watched Tommy successfully diagnose and fix the carburetor problem, the boy's face lighting up with pride at his accomplishment. This was what Vincent had been fighting to protect, not just his business or his reputation, but the future of a son who deserved better than the lies and manipulation he'd been subjected to. The shop's phone rang, and Maria answered it with her usual gruff efficiency. After a brief conversation, she hung up and turned to Vincent with a worried expression. "That was Ghost," she said. "Morrison's lawyer wants to meet with you. Something about new information." Vincent felt the old alertness returning. Morrison had been in protective custody for 6 months, supposedly cooperating fully with federal investigators. What new information could he possibly have? "Did Ghost say what kind of information?" Vincent asked. "Something about Linda," Maria replied, "and something about other victims Morrison worked with before he met her." Vincent looked at Tommy, who was cleaning his hands with a shop rag, completely absorbed in honest work. The boy had been through enough trauma. Whatever Morrison's new revelation might be, Vincent would handle it himself. "Rick," Vincent said quietly, "I need you to watch Tommy tonight. And call Ghost. Tell him I'll meet Morrison's lawyer tomorrow morning." Rick nodded, understanding immediately. "You think there's more to this story?" "There's always more to the story," Vincent replied. "The question is whether it's something that can hurt us." That evening, as Vincent and Tommy worked together on the Mustang restoration, the boy looked up from the engine bay with serious eyes. "Dad, Do you ever regret not just walking away? When you found out about Mom and Morrison, you could have just divorced her quietly. Why did you fight so hard? Vincent considered the question carefully. Tommy deserved an honest answer, not a platitude about justice or revenge. Because some things are worth fighting for, Vincent said finally. Your identity as my son was worth fighting for. The truth about what kind of people were trying to destroy our family was worth fighting for. And most importantly, making sure you understood that real strength comes from protecting the people you love. That was worth fighting for. Tommy nodded slowly, processing the answer. Would you do it again? If you had to. Vincent looked at his son, really looked at him. The boy was growing into a young man, and he was asking the kinds of questions that would define his own character. Tommy, I hope you never have to find out what you're capable of when someone threatens your family. But if that day comes, I hope you'll remember that being a good man doesn't mean being a weak man. Sometimes, protecting the innocent requires destroying the guilty. As they worked in comfortable silence, Vincent felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. The phoenix had risen from the ashes of betrayal, and what had emerged was stronger, wiser, and more dangerous than ever before. Tomorrow, he would learn what new threats Morrison's information might pose. But tonight, he was exactly where he belonged, working beside his son, building something that would last, protected by the knowledge that he would never again allow anyone to threaten what he'd fought so hard to preserve. The war for his family was over. Vincent Torino had won. But as any veteran of real warfare knew, victory only lasted until the next battle began. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.